real Titanic and her sisters, Olympic and Britannic, were 882.5 feet in length. That's 269 meters. By today's standards, they would be 5 times smaller than our ships and about twice as big as Noah's Ark. They were considered practically unsinkable because they were divided into 16 watertight compartments leading back from the bow. Now the theory was that any 2 or any 3 or any 4 of the 16 watertight compartments could be damaged and fully flooded with seawater, and the ship would settle in the ocean and she would become practically unsinkable. Unfortunately, the night of the Titanic disaster, the first 4 watertight compartments were opened up and 2 feet into boiler room number 5. It was this little bit of damage that caused the Titanic to go to the bottom. You see, the watertight compartments only went as high as E deck, and even in the Britannic, the third sister, when they changed this design, it didn't stop her from sinking either. The plans for the Titanic and her sister ship, the Olympic, were used in the British and American inquiries into the Titanic disaster, which placed them in the public domain and therefore made them available for me to cross-reference and use for the TINTANIC model. Upon closer inspection of the blueprints of the Olympic and the Titanic, I found that you could potentially divide this ship into various sections at various intervals, more or less equally spaced, and then join it all together to make one big 8.7 meter long Titanic. Section 1 would be the bow of the ship, the forward part of the vessel that triangulated towards the tip of the bow, and it could easily separate in the middle of the forward well deck. It would contain the forward mast, the crow's nest, the anchors, the anchor chains, the forecastle deck, and all the deck equipment associated with that part of the ship. Underneath all of this, you would have crew mess areas and crew sleeping quarters. It's also the place where most third-class single men were housed. And that would become Section 1. Section 2 would be everything under the number 1 funnel, or smokestack. It would house the bridge of the ship, the officers' quarters, Captain Smith's quarters, his bedroom, his bathroom, his sitting room. The A-deck promenade forward, it would have the forward well deck attached to it with its massive famous cranes, and then further down in the ship, first class accommodations, then steerage right at the bottom. The Titanic was known as RMS Titanic. She was a Royal Mail steamer, therefore she carried mail across the Atlantic. She had to have an onboard ocean-going post office and mail room. These were the first spaces inside the Titanic that started to flood when the Titanic hit the iceberg. This is also where the first reports came from that the Titanic was actually going down, or that water was entering spaces within the ship. Section 3 was a little bit more elaborate. It contained everything under the number 2 funnel. The first class grand staircases, the millionaire suites, the reception room on D deck, part of the first class dining room, as well as the ship's swimming pool on F deck and the famed Turkish baths. If you've ever had a Turkish bath in your life, you'd know that that was not a very happy experience. They would slap you around. This would all sit on top of the boiler rooms number 6, number 5, and number 4. Boiler rooms number 6 and number 5 were the most crucial boiler rooms that were damaged in the collision, causing the bow to go down so deep that it dragged the ship under. This is what Thomas Andrews was referring to when he said, but this was a mathematical certainty that the ship was going to go down. In 1911, the Titanic sister ship, the Olympic, had an accident while she was traveling in the Solent with the HMS Hawk, which was a Navy auxiliary cruiser. and while on parallel courses, the Olympic sucked the Hawk into her side, damaging 2 of her 16 watertight compartments. Its bow was designed to cut through other ships. The Olympic survived the incident because only 2 of her 16 watertight compartments were flooded. All that did was reassure the world that these ships were unsinkable, untouchable. Section 4 would contain everything under the number 3 funnel, or smokestack. This would be the first class lounge, the majority of special first class cabins. The space was especially cramped because of the reciprocating engines down below. It was a honeycomb of activity in rooms and corridors and stairwells, including the aft set of grand staircases. Down below, the section would feature third class accommodations in the third class dining room, as well as the remainder of the boiler rooms 3, 2, and 1. I did allow for room in the design of Titanic to accommodate the crampedness and the lack of space by joining 2 deck houses under the number 3 funnel, and nobody really questions it. They look at the model and you'd never say it. Section 5 was very interesting. It contained the number 4 dummy funnel or smokestack, and it sat on top of one of the largest rooms inside the ship, the first class smoking room. On B deck you actually had the a la carte restaurant, and then further down into the ship, the second class dining room, the ship's kitchens, which attached to the turbine engine room, and of course no boiler rooms in this section. But it was interesting nonetheless because this section actually contained the aft mast. All of these sections would then lead up to Section 6. Section 6 overhung the massive bronze propellers and the 101-ton rudder of the ship, and a wonderfully rounded overhang right at the back of the ship. We'd have this labyrinth of corridors and third class accommodation for third class steerage passengers, and a lot of the third class family accommodations were located in the stern of the ship. This is where the vibrations from the engines would be most prominent. Things like the third class general room, third class smoking room and bar, the cargo cranes, the cargo hatches, and then further down into the ship, this elaborate length of third class staircases. It's probably the section of the ship that holds the most emotion. People on the Titanic met their end because they were locked and barred behind gates.